The world's greatest mysteries of science and history. You're watching the MHS Network.
Welcome to the MHS Network.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Coleman.
I'm Byron.
And welcome to another episode of MHS Network. Today, we have a very special guest. Well, first off, let me preface that with saying that we are talking about Zodiac again. It's been a while since we've talked about any true crime. And I know a while back we did a whole video series on Zodiac. We did some audio dramas. We talked about the 340 solution. We talked about all the canonical killings of Zodiac, just pretty much everything you think of, we've pretty much talked about in some way or another. But we're once again talking about Zodiac because we have a very special guest today. His name is Drew Beeson. He's an author. He has written numerous works surrounding true crime and other subjects. Some of those books include Out of Bounds, What Happened to the Yuba County Five, Paratrooper of Fortune, The Story of Ted B. Braden, Vietnam Commando, CIA Operative, Congo Mercenary, and just maybe D.B. Cooper, and also citing in on the Zodiac Killer, Unmasking America's Most Puzzling Unsolved Murders, along with a list of other books as well. Links to those books will be provided in the description box, so please go check it out. If you're interested, please support Drew Beeson. That would be really appreciated. So, so let's go ahead and get started into the questions. So Drew, one of the questions I want to ask you when you're talking about Zodiac is, I want to ask you, how did you get interested in this case? How did you find out about Zodiac, and what got you just in general interested on Zodiac?
It goes back not too far back, but always known about the case. Always kind of liked it, never set out to solve it, but I had just, kind of a general knowledge. I knew what happened in the Bay Area of San Francisco, saw a few programs on it, but I was never obsessed with it or tried to break it or anything like that. And I was actually going to do some voiceovers with a guy that I met through Craigslist and just, kind of do some voiceover stuff on the side, in addition to my regular job. And I told him how I had just done a podcast about DB Cooper, and he threw out, he goes, "Man, I'm really into the Zodiac case." And this was probably 2 years ago now. And I said, "I am too. I kind of interested in that." And that, him having that in common with me, I kind of delved back into it again. And what really got me into the case was watching a video called "His Name is Arthur Lee Allen," which of course was produced alongside with the David Fincher film that was made in 2007. And that really got me into the case and wanted to get, dig deeper into it and find out more.
Right. And so with being really interested, I'm sure earlier this year, or actually, I think it was last year at this point, when the Z340 cipher was solved, that was big news for you. What were your thoughts when that initially got solved?
Wow, I couldn't believe it. I'm trying to remember when I first saw it. I was at work, and it might have been on Instagram where someone posted something about it being solved, and I just couldn't believe it. I thought, this is amazing, and I knew it had to have something to do with Dave Aranchek, who I'm well aware of. And it did, of course, and he had the help of two other gentlemen. I think it was Jarl Van Eck and I can't remember the other guy, Sam Blake, sorry. And so the three of them. So yeah, I was really excited. I knew that would breathe a lot of new life into this case, and it did. It brought a lot of people back around to it that haven't thought about it for a while. Of course, unfortunately, it didn't give the name of the killer, but it was more of what they call just the Zodiac slang, or just the verbiage that you would expect from Zodiac. But it was a good confirmed solve, and it was exciting, and it kind of spurred me on to even try harder to break this case wide open.
I do want to expand on the Z340. Sorry, this wasn't on the question. When you first heard it, did you believe it was actually the real solved answer? Did you actually believe that this was the true meaning of the cipher, or were you skeptical? Are you still skeptical?
I wasn't skeptical at all. I knew Dave was involved with it, I knew it was good. I've known him for quite some time. He actually follows me on my channel, which is a huge honor. And I knew it was good. I knew it was good immediately when I saw his name attached to it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for me personally with the Z340, I was kind of on the boat with a lot of people where I kind of starting to subscribe to the theory that maybe it was just gibberish, just because of the fact that so many people have been looking at for so long, and it took us decades to come up with a solution. And so, like I said, I was trying to lean towards that direction. Like, I really do think this is kind of, is there really even a real solution? So I remember when I think it was actually Byron who told me about the cipher being solved. I couldn't believe it at first. And so, but yeah, I'll never forget that. That was I think a huge moment in the Zodiac case, and definitely, I think, I don't know, just kind of push people forward to keep looking at this case and investigating it and digging deeper. So, so with that being said, do you think that there's a possibility for the remaining ciphers to be solved? Since we solved C340, do you think that with that momentum, we could solve these other ciphers as well?
I don't know. I hate going, I never go too far out on a limb with the ciphers, but I'm certainly hopeful they will be. Obviously, the My Name is cipher would be a great one to solve, but there's so many theories involving that. It could say Alfred E. Newman or several other things, but there could be. Very hopeful. I know they're still working on it. I know a guy like Dave is not going to give up. I mean, he's driven, and he finally got the big prize of solving one with his team, and I know those guys are going to keep at it hard. So I'm hopeful that they will be. I don't think that'll give the name away, though. I really don't. I don't think that will reveal a name. I don't think he would have been that careless.
I mean, on one hand, it does at least show us that they weren't gibberish, and he at least put answers to those ciphers. Now, necessarily what they mean is going to be up for debate, and that brings us to back to Z340. What was the Zodiac in Z340, and he mentions it in another cipher. He mentions paradise spelled with a C quite a few times, and in the Z340 specifically, he mentions a collection of slaves in paradise. How does that tie back to the Zodiac? Did the Zodiac have a notorious love for the occult? Was there a specific religion he was trying to mimic with the way he was talking? What are your thoughts there?
I don't see anything occult in the Zodiac case. I really don't. I never have. I know there's a lot of talk about Anton LaVey, and maybe the Zodiac briefly attended the Church of Satan in San Francisco, and a lot of the occult stuff was popular back then. But personally, I've never seen anything overtly occult in the Zodiac case. I think Slaves in Paradise is just something that he thought sounded cool. I really do. I mean, I think the Zodiac itself meant something to him. The character that he created meant something, but I don't see anything occult in it whatsoever. Slaves in Paradise, they could just go back to something he liked or something he read, and I don't think it really meant that much to him. I think that was just for creep factor, fear factor, for the people that were gonna, read the newspapers and read the letters and just get scared from him. I don't think he, probably even literally believed that.
Right. And I was going to actually ask you a follow-up question, but you already answered it, in regards to, is he just kind of try to put on a front maybe to scare people? I know what comes to mind is the whole Zodiac button situation that, where Zodiac would, threaten certain things of going on a kill spree on Friday night. In one of his letters, he said if certain things weren't done. So I definitely think that, the whole collection of slaves for paradise, if he wasn't actually, holding on to those beliefs or whatever, I definitely feel kind of like what you said, Drew, was just trying to build off that fear and then just that atmosphere of just, putting people in the surrounding areas, just in fear and worry, essentially. So I think that's a good point you brought up.
Yeah. But so, we'll never know for sure, unfortunately, but just building, I think he said that the Lake Herman Road crime, which was the first canonical Zodiac attack, he did say that's when he began his collection of slaves. So I know a lot of people try to tie in the Riverside murder of Sherry Jo Bates that happened in 1966 to the Zodiac and things like that. But he did specifically mention that his collection of slaves started with Lake Herman Road in 1968. So where do we believe Zodiac and where do we not believe Zodiac is kind of always the thing that goes on with him, because we know he's a liar. But when was he telling the truth? We don't, we just don't know.
Are there any of the non-canonical killings that you kind of subscribe to as being possibly or more than likely Zodiac, besides maybe the Sherry Jo Bates murder?
Yeah, with Bates, I kind of lean against that being a Zodiac crime. I think there's a good possibility he did write the correspondence associated with it, but I don't think he did the actual murder. And that's just kind of, my own personal belief. But for me and my theory, it doesn't really affect my theory one way or the other if Bates was a Zodiac crime or not. So I don't really go real heavy on it, but it's just my personal feeling that that wasn't a Zodiac crime, but that he most likely did take credit for it with the letters. And then obviously in his own letters, where he claimed, I see you've stumbled upon my river, giving credit to the police, which he hated to give credit to the police for anything. So that kind of even leads me more to believe that he didn't do Riverside, but just took credit for it. Of any of the non-canonical Zodiac crimes, I think the Gaviota Beach murders with Dominguez Edwards murders, the young couple that skipped school in their senior year, they were engaged to be married, that were murdered down on Gaviota Beach in Santa Barbara County. I think that one sounds the most likely to me could have been Zodiac, but kind of like Riverside, I'm not really convinced either way that it was or was not. But of all of them, I would say that's the most likely Zodiac.
Right. And so with talking about, most likely motive, what are your thoughts on the popular suspects for being Zodiac, right? We of course know you have a different opinion than most people. You have a different opinion, especially than David Finch in the David Finch film. Run us through some of the top suspects and tell us why you eliminate some of them.
Golly, you know what? I eliminated pretty much all of them, and of course, Artley Allen is the prime suspect in this case, and he always will be, and there's good reason for that because the circumstantial evidence for Artley Allen is very strong. There's some things that point against him, but the things for him are stronger than any other lead suspect. I mean, you see names like Ross Sullivan, really popular on Reddit for a while. There is really nothing compelling to me about Ross Sullivan. He has a lot of problems as a suspect. One, he was every bit of, he was 6'2" and he weighed 300 pounds. And I know people that like him for a suspect and that no, he was as big as Ross Sullivan. And we do know for a fact he weighed 300 pounds because he was arrested in 1967 in Santa Cruz for odd behavior in a phone booth. And when they arrested him, they noted his size. He was such a big guy that they bothered to mention his exact height and weight in the article that talked about him having this bizarre behavior and harassing a guy in a phone booth. So he's a big guy. That's a big hold against Ross Sullivan. Another one is he had severe mental illness. In the early 60s, he was committed to a mental institution for 3 years. This is before he went to Riverside College. When I think a guy with that level of, he was schizophrenic, bipolar, I think really both. I mean, he had severe mental problems. He just did not have the mental organization to do what the Zodiac did, because the Zodiac created ciphers, as we talked about with the 340. I mean, that took a lot of fine printing. I think the Zodiac did that with graph paper on a light table. That's why the cipher symbols look so neat. That's why his handwriting is so sloppy. And they took time to write the ciphers. It took time to not get caught for these crimes. It took time to plan these crimes and to create this character known as the Zodiac. I don't think Ross Sullivan had that. I mean, people can talk about mentally ill people being able to get it together at certain points, but if you read about him, he just didn't have it together to be able to do what the Zodiac did. I mean, they would call that, I think, in crime solving, mentally organized. And Ross Sullivan was not that. And people just go on, will he look like the sketch? Well, look at any old yearbook from 1960 up to 1975, and half the white males in it look like that sketch. The sketch is a throwaway, in my opinion. It really is. The actual witness descriptions that were described are far more valuable than a sketch that was based off of teenager witness descriptions. The oldest person, they were the Robbins kids. There was 3 of them. The oldest was 13, and that's what mainly who comments created that sketch. So people that like Sullivan, like to point at that, but there's really nothing compelling about him. And then you hear about Larry Kane a lot as a suspect. Larry Kane was really too small to be the Zodiac. He was 5'8". He wasn't stocky whatsoever. He was kind of a scrawny guy. He was a real estate agent. And I always go back to that in my stuff. It's clear now, and I know you guys like to talk about the 340, and you should. And one of the best things that came out about that is no, it wasn't gibberish, but it was a more complex cipher than the 408 that was solved by Donald Gene Hard, the school teacher. It was definitely harder to make that cipher. That's why it was so much harder to break. We know that the 408 was solved within just weeks of it being published by Donald Gene Hard and his wife. So why did it take 51 years to solve the 340? Because it was harder to make. So we know that the Zodiac was definitely influenced by mathematics and was probably very high functioning intellectually. That's not good for Larry Kane, because Larry Kane had been in a car accident. He had some mental issues of his own. His handwriting wasn't anywhere near close to what Zodiac's was. I've never really studied Ross Sullivan's handwriting that closely, by the way, but I always think of those two guys first as far as suspects, because they are kicked around so often. I know Tom Voigt of ZodiacKiller.com loves Richard Gaikowski as a suspect. I don't like Richard Gaikowski as a suspect. To me, there's nothing compelling about him whatsoever. Doesn't really match any of the descriptions. He wasn't stocky. There's nothing in his background that points to mathematics, although he did get into computers later in life. He published a newspaper called Good Times Magazine in San Francisco. He was a newspaper writer. We know the Zodiac was a mathematics person, and I was always convinced that the Zodiac did something mathematical for a living, or at least at some point in his career. And so that's why I really point against a lot of other suspects. Mainly, I just don't see that have it. Obviously, Ted Kaczynski is kicked around as a suspect. He would have definitely had the mathematical aptitude, but Ted Kaczynski was a little too much into the math that you see from the Zodiac. He was in Berkeley for a while. It's not, we can't even pin down where Ted Kaczynski was during the Zodiac crimes. Was he in Illinois? Was he back in Berkeley? We really don't know. There's just not a whole lot going for Kaczynski either as a suspect. So, I kind of the things that I hold against a lot of them kind of go across the board. They don't either have the math, or they don't have the physical description going for them, or they just have a complete lack of what really should make them a good suspect. So that's just a few of them.
And it is worth noting, right? Because we talked about I forget his name. I want to say Larry Kane.
Larry Kane.
Being 300 pounds, a teenager's gonna.
No, Sullivan.
Sullivan being
Yeah,
300
Sullivan.
pounds.
Yeah.
A teenager's gonna note that, right? A teenager, especially 13.
Yeah, they're gonna
years
note
old,
that
because they have to look up and out at this man. Like they're gonna note a huge man like that.
He was a big man. No matter how he carried it, he was a big guy. So it's a huge strike against him. And there's other ones too. He wasn't known for driving a car during the time of the murder. Santa Cruz, which isn't terribly far from the Bay Area, but there's nothing that even places him in Vallejo, Benicia, where the Lake Herman Road crime happened. There's nothing that places him in Napa or Lake Berryessa. Nothing. And he wasn't even said to have been driving a vehicle at that time. He was so mentally ill that I don't think he could drive a vehicle. I know he owned a motorcycle at one point. I think he probably did drive in the maybe 66 when he was going to Riverside College with Sherry Joe Bates, but he's just a bad suspect. I mean, certain people that like him get offended by that, but there's really nothing there. That's why he was popular for a while, and then he just goes away because there's just nothing compelling there.
And I don't want to go back too far back with our questions, because I know earlier we talked about the ciphers, and now we're kind of talking about the suspects and everything like that. But I like how you brought up the difficulty and the experience that would have been necessary for the Z340, and how we know that because it was solved, and so we know the amount of technicality that went into putting it together and for the solution and everything like that. Do you think that, and I feel like this is important because I feel like this could maybe rule out some suspects, at least more surely than some people may think. But with the Z340 and everything, and what about ciphers, do you think the difficulty that went into it, do you think that that's something someone like a Ross Sullivan who worked at a library could have researched on his own, or do you think that could have had to have come from someone with a job or something, some type of formal education in receiving those skills with ciphers to come up with the Z340? What are your thoughts on that?
I think they were formally trained in not only had a knack for advanced mathematics, but trained in it. Had some training. I don't know about obviously they picked up ciphering at some point. The Zodiac did, because he was making ciphers. But and they said Ross Sullivan had a cipher class when he went to Riverside College. I've never seen any proof of that, by the way, but I just accept it. Okay, go ahead and put that in Ross's corner. But I honestly don't think I've ever seen any solid proof. I don't know how you could go back to 1966 and get someone's class list, but that's always kicked around, which is funny about this case. People just take certain things for granted. I've always heard that about Ross Sullivan. Well, he had a cryptography class at Riverside. It's like, I've never seen proof of that. I never really worked that hard to go find that, but and if he did, great for him. He might have, but that wouldn't have been enough, I think, to have created the 340. I really don't. There's other things involved in what the Zodiac wrote about and did. He's kind of a really, was influenced by a lot of different things, not just the Mikado, but he had the bus bomb diagram, right. Which was more of a flow chart. And if you look at the electronics involved in that, you bet it would have worked. And that points a lot there too. So what trained Ross Sullivan to know anything about electronics or bus bombs or photoelectric cells? Nothing that I've seen. He's terrible. He's just the guy to kick around Reddit for people that don't know the case, to me. If anyone truly believes that Ross Sullivan has a good chance of being the Zodiac, I think that they just don't know the case whatsoever.
Yeah, even if you give Ross Sullivan that cryptology class, right? We've been trying to solve these ciphers for 51 years, right? And we just solved one of them, right? Been 51 years.
Yeah, with a computer program, with
advanced computer programs that they wouldn't have even dreamed of at the time in the 60s. So
never could have dreamed of.
Whoever made up these ciphers wasn't like, oh, I took one cryptology class in college.
Exactly.
It was someone who knew everything there was to know about ciphers and graphs and advanced mathematics, like you said.
Yeah, that's obvious. Yeah, it did. I think it was to certain suspects that don't have that background. And again, that's so all the top ones. Larry Kane, none known with mathematics. Gaikowski, none that I know of. Got into computers later. He might have had some like for it, but no one that knew him knew that about him. None of these guys, Kane, Sullivan, Gaikowski, I can't think of any of them that really had it other than Kaczynski. But there's nothing else going for Kaczynski. So I mean, he's got the math part. Gareth Penn is a Zodiac suspect. There's a guy that has a YouTube channel, trying to convince people that Gareth Penn was a Zodiac. Gareth Penn knew the mathematics part of it. Was definitely smart enough to be, but he's got a lot of things against him as well. Really skinny guy, wasn't stocky, barrel chested like all witness descriptions of the Zodiac. A lot of things point away from him as well. So the guys that do have the math, could have done the math, have so much against them. With Gareth Penn, I actually heard on Black Box Online on YouTube, my friend Ned hosts that show, said that I think it was actually Gareth Penn's father. I used to give Gareth Penn credit for saying this one statement, but he said only 1 out of 100 people would have known what a radian was and how to use a radian. And of course, the Zodiac talked about radians and inches along the radians. When he talked about Mount Diablo, and either Gareth Penn or his father, whoever made that statement, I completely agree with. Michael Cole's new book about Zodiac Revisited mentions radians and says, even if you had that in calculus or whatever in high school, you're not going to remember it that many years later. You might have learned it well enough for a test, but if you're not using that in your everyday work or something, you're not going to know what a radian is and be able to use it to any certain level. So I think that rules out so many suspects right there. They would not have known what a radian was or cared to use it in a letter. They just wouldn't. I mean, it's everything Zodiac did shows that he had a heavy background in mathematics.
Right. And so with that being said, we talked about a lot of the skills that Zodiac would have had to have in order to do these things. And we talked about how, a lot of these popular suspects such as, Ross Sullivan, Lawrence Kane, Richard Geig, et cetera, et cetera. So with that being said, Drew, who is your top suspect who you believe fits all these characteristics that these other suspects do not?
His name is Donald Lee Cheney from Bakersfield, California. I believe fully now, even more so when I wrote my book, that he is the Zodiac killer. He, of course, is the guy that brought forward Arthur Lee Allen as a suspect in July of 1971. I'm fully convinced Donald Lee Cheney was the Zodiac killer. I believe he created the Zodiac, the character of Zodiac And I believe when he met Arthur Lee Allen, it was his perfect opportunity to make this grand master work known as this Zodiac come to life. And he saw in Arthur Lee Allen his opportunity to make this come to life, and that's exactly how it played out.
Now, was there with John Cheney, was there a military background? Because I know a lot of people, they put a lot of emphasis on that because of I believe it's the wing walker shoe print that they found on one of the murder cases that happened within the canonical murders. And so I know a lot of people since then have speculated, along with the ciphers, and then like you talked about the radiance and everything, you know, a lot of people speculate that Zodiac might have had military experience, might have been prior service of some kind. Does Don Cheney have that prior service? Is he prior military?
2 years Air Force, which is my own discovery. He did 2 years Air Force, being trained as a navigator in Harlingen Air Force Base in Harlingen, Texas, in 1957. And he learned specifically. He had I even know all the hours that they trained. I had the list of classes that they would take when he was there. He had celestial navigation training at Harlingen. It was called Night Cell for short, which kind of ties into Michael Cole's theory, where he always believed the Zodiac had celestial navigation training, because some of the murders took place close to like the winter solstice and things like that. And obviously you had on Mount Diablo, the Zodiac drew a compass, obviously out of his Zodiac cross circle logo. He made that into a compass rose. Well, Don Cheney had navigation training as an aviator in flight. And I know that he had advanced electronics training while he was at Harlingen. So 2 years Air Force right there. He could have easily gone onto a base after being Air Force for 2 years and bought wing walker shoes. And also he was a mechanical engineer. He worked in places like power plants that were slippery, oils and things like that. So, you'd also call something that looked like a wing walker an engineer shoe. Well, Don Cheney was a mechanical engineer, and he would work in places that having a non-slip sole would be very important to have, and something that wouldn't bring an electrical charge up through the shoe, which is another important thing that a wing walker would do. You wouldn't do that. So for him and his vocation, he absolutely would have preferred a shoe like a wing walker. And being a former Air Force, he certainly could have gone on base and bought them. So 2 years Air Force right there. That's one of my own discoveries about him that no one knew before.
Wow, and being in navigation, he would have advanced knowledge of graphs and light tables as well. He would know
Absolutely.
How to use those.
Absolutely. Well, he was also he was a draftsman, true, because back in the early days of being a mechanical engineer, you didn't have AutoCAD yet. There was some early computer stuff in mechanical engineering, but it was mostly done by hand. So he could absolutely do drafting, which I think the Zodiac obviously knew how to do. If you look at his pen strokes, some were heavier than others. They call that a lettering pen, or having lettering pen experienced. And I talk about that in my book too. And it's clear to me that the Zodiac could do that. He had drafting experience, writing symbols out, writing things that were heavier. It's like calligraphy, but when you were a mechanical engineer in the early days, you could do, represent different things. Drawing, you would have a little kit, and they called it was an engineer set, and they had what were called nibs, and they had different sized nibs that would do finer lines or thicker lines. And you can see that through a lot of the Zodiac's work. Some of the lines were deliberately thicker than others. And Don Cheney could certainly draft as a mechanical engineer, and obviously had the mathematics background. We talk about radians. Well, he was also specifically worked at times as a pipe stress analyst. So yeah, he knew what a radian was, no problem. So he's got all the goods: military, mechanical engineer. He's got it all.
And so why does Cheney kill? Why does Cheney invent the Zodiac? What is his motive? What is his reason for this?
I wish I knew. I mean, if I knew, I would be able to just know everything. I can tell you there's a lot of strange things about him. He was highly intelligent. I can tell for so many reasons the things he says, the way he does things. When you see him on his Name Was Arthur Lee Allen video, he's basically so smart. He's telling you through Arthur Lee Allen that he is the Zodiac. That's how smart he is and how he can couch it. And as far as what would drive him to do that, I'm not sure. But I can tell you that as smart as he was, he could never hold a job. For some reason, something was definitely preoccupying him. He was estranged from his family from around 1977, because of course after all the letters had stopped and the murders had all happened. Of course, the last canonical crime was Paul Stein in late 1969. But Cheney winds up being estranged from his family. They all moved back to the East Coast, and he stayed on the West Coast. He eventually moves up to Benton City, Washington. And his son and daughter are still out on the East Coast. He doesn't hardly see them at all anymore, which is really strange to me. And winds up officially getting divorced from his wife in the 80s. And that's it. Just estranged from his family, never holds a job. He works for his friend Sandy Panzarella for a long time at a company called Science Dynamics, and that's where he was working at the time he brought forward Arthur Lee Allen as a suspect. He doesn't even last working for his friend. And Sandy Panzarella made tens of millions of dollars when he started Science Dynamics. They were a computerized billing company for the medical industry. So you can see how that became kind of profitable, doing something in 1971 doing that, because Panzarella was a electrical engineer, and then he was going to Cal Poly Pomona. That's when he met Don Cheney and, of course, Arthur Lee Allen and Arthur Lee Allen's younger brother, Ron Allen. So there's something going on with Cheney that he cannot hold a job as smart as he is. He's estranged from his family for no real reason. There's no job holding him to the West Coast. So why wouldn't he just move to the East Coast? Even if he doesn't want to be around his wife, he still could be around his grown children who are no longer living with his wife, for many of those years. So all I can tell you is there's some weird stuff like that going on with him. I don't know anything about his relationship with his mother or what could have driven him to this, but I just sense in him that he felt frustrated that no one could really see his genius. And I think he was just frustrated by that, and maybe some other event in his life that I don't yet know of. But I wish I knew the motive. Sometimes we only know the motive when the killer could speak about it after they're caught or something like that. But in this case, I really don't know. I just think there's a lot of strange stuff going on with him that I've seen.
Right. And one interesting thing you brought up too, and the whole interesting in general when it comes to Don Cheney is, his connection with Arthur Lee Allen, and how, when he came forward with Arthur Lee Allen, that, it almost instantaneously made Arthur Lee Allen a prime suspect. And like you said earlier, still a prime suspect in the Zodiac case. And for many people, they're still, in their minds, their top suspect, even though, there's issues with the DNA and the handwriting and the partial palm print, which was compared to I believe it was the extras letter, where they're able to extract the partial palm print, which didn't match Allen's, along with a host of, a bunch of other stuff. Do you think Arthur Lee Allen has connections to this case still with Cheney? Do you think that he maybe worked with Cheney? Do you think that they were both in on this? And to what extent, if so?
That is the $1 million question. I get asked that a lot, and I ponder that a lot. When I wrote my book, I would say Arthur Lee Allen had a really, really small role in it that he might have not even been aware of. But as time has gone on, I'm kind of reconsidered Allen's part in it, and I think Allen definitely played a smaller role in the crimes. I don't know to what extent. I mean, it's possible that he could have been a ride along at Lake Herman Road. There was a extra shell casing that was never found, it indicates there could have been a second shooter, and that could have been Allen, and that could have been all Don Cheney needed to have Allen complicit in it and make Allen obey his commands, basically blackmailing him into this whole grand scheme where, okay, I got you for this, so if you step out of line any bit with what I'm going to do with you, you're going to go to jail. So here's what I'm going to do. I mean, and this is all speculation on my part, by the way. Just playing all the scenarios that could have gone on there. What we're going to do is we're going to point some blame towards you, but trust me, I'm not going to let you go down for these crimes, but we're at least going to play with the cops, and we're going to tell them it's you, and they're going to come interview you, but they're never going to find the Zodiac hood. You're never going to find any of the weapons used that they can tie up with the shell casings from these crimes. And you just got to trust me, Lee. And, it could have been something like that. We just don't know. And it could have been something like Cheney and Allen sitting around one day and coming up with some of these ideas, and Cheney just seeing an opportunity that he can actually go do these murders, and convincing Allen that they're just going to take credit for the murders. So maybe Allen is complicit with Cheney on just doing the letter part of it and not actually being involved in the actual crimes themselves, and never really figuring this out, what Don was doing. There's something in there, and I know those two possibilities are kind of broad, but somewhere those two connect. So I'm pretty convinced that Allen I think he was a patsy for the most part, where Don was going to put the blame on him. but I think there's some things that Allen would have had to have known going along with it. You know, number one is when Allen was questioned early on, just like after the Lake Berryessa attack, by Detective John Lynch. And it seemed that Arthur Lee Allen was expecting him. It really did, because he told him immediately, well, I was going to go to Lake Berryessa that day, but I went down the coast instead. So there you have Arthur Lee Allen immediately. You know, first of all, he's being questioned that early on. And this is way before Don Cheney comes forward with a story in July of 71. This is just 2 weeks after the Lake Berryessa attack in September of 1969. So why is Arthur Lee Allen already being questioned? You know, it's just something that really makes me think that that he had some more involvement, knew he was going to be questioned that day.
I do want to kind of backtrack here a little bit, not really. And then this is all speculation, but when Cheney was in the Air Force, that would have been during Vietnam. Did he spend any time in Vietnam? Could that have possibly affected him mentally?
No, that wasn't during Vietnam. That was in 1957. That was definitely like, what's going on? I think Korea would have been going on there, but
that's Korea.
Yeah,
That's Korea.
Korea,
That's
yeah.
no, he never saw combat. Never did anything. Never did anything combat wise or anything like that. But one interesting thing about it is that when you went to the type of training that Don Cheney had, you would become career Air Force. And somebody suggested that off of my channel to me once, and I looked into that. He was right. I read even at Harlingen Air Force Base in one of the graduating classes that 96% of that particular class, not Cheney's, I think it was one a year or two later, said that like 94% went on to be career Air Force. So then again, there's something odd about Cheney not carrying on with every year at Bakersfield High School, had an arts degree from Bakersfield Junior College, and he also went to Cal Poly Pomona, trained as a mechanical engineer. So super smart, but never seemed to finish anything. I don't know why. There's something going on with him that I'd love to know, but the things just add up that he could never hold a job, and it wasn't due. I can tell you two things for sure. It wasn't due to lack of intelligence, and it wasn't due to laziness. He was not a lazy guy. This guy could do crazy things. He could do he would do terracing around his house, just huge project, ripping things out and building them back by hand. He had so many skills. He could just build anything with his hands. He he did leather, really nice leather work. He made leather sheaths for knives. Isn't that interesting? Beautiful work, sewing. This guy just had multiple skills. That he was an avid big game hunter, which most people didn't know before my work that he was. And you talk about the Zodiac, you talk about the 408 cipher and reverencing the man is the most dangerous animal of all. And, this sounds like a hunter. And John Cheney was a avid big game hunter. He would go hunting for days out in the woods, camping, cooking the food that from the animals he killed. And I don't know any other Zodiac suspect that was an avid big game hunter other than Don Cheney. So it's just another thing in his corner that none of the others have.
Now, one of the things that you bring up in your videos that I think is extremely interesting in connecting Don Cheney to all of this as being possibly, a Zodiac suspect, and you'll have to tell me, I'm really bad with names, and it's been a while since I've looked at the details of this case, but the secret PAL letter that was sent to, I think it was the SF Chronicle, correct me if I'm wrong.
The Halloween card.
Right. And then you connected that with someone that Cheney knew who that card was sent to, I believe in college or something like that, and with the Mikado and everything. Does that ring any bells?
Oh, of course. That's my biggest discovery. Well, that's what I'm credited by the Zodiac community is my biggest find. And I see it that way. And what's interesting is when I made this find, I had already written a book. So I had already written a book making an extremely compelling case for Don Cheney being the Zodiac killer before I found this piece of information. So it's just like icing on the cake, the way I look at it. And I found out that Don Cheney, I knew he was from Bakersfield, California. And I knew he was born in Bakersfield and spent a lot of his life there before he eventually leaves Bakersfield. The first time he ever left was to go join when he was in the Air Force in Harlingen, Texas. He came back to Bakersfield shortly, and then he went off to Pomona, California to go to Cal Poly. But anyway, Right after Bakersfield High School, he went into Bakersfield Junior College, and that shares the same campus with Don Cheney's high school, Bakersfield High. Really small junior college. I mean, maybe only 200 people per class. And of course, junior college, so it's just freshmen and sophomores. Well, I was looking at one of the yearbooks, just kind of looking for some stuff on Don Cheney. He never comes up in any yearbook for Bakersfield College. Only reason I know he went there is one, it's in his wedding announcement, and that was printed in Bakersfield, so they're not going to lie about it when you print it in your hometown. Fortunately, they had a good newspaper there called the Bakersfield Californian. Don got married in Pomona, where his bride was from, and they also published a wedding announcement there, and it mentioned that Don had graduated from Bakersfield Junior College. So I knew that he did. No reason to lie about it. And then when I was looking through one of the yearbooks, I looked at the school newspapers, which are all online, which is such a neat thing. They had their school newspapers all the way back through the 40s and the 50s, 60s, all online. The school newspaper was called the Renegade Rip at Bakersfield Junior College. And they had a little caption there that showed the different people that worked at the school newspaper. Well, one of the names of a reporter was Paul Avery. And I'm thinking, oh, no way. This couldn't be the Paul Avery that made himself famous reporting on the Zodiac case when he worked for the San Francisco Chronicle. Couldn't be. I mean, and I was just like, I can't be him, just the sheer odds. How would this guy be at Bakersfield Junior College at the same time as Don Cheney? And I can tell you, Paul Avery was born the same month, same year as Don Cheney, April 1934. So I was able to do a little background work, and lo and behold, it was the Paul Avery at that little bitty junior college with Don Cheney. They had to have known each other, and at bare minimum, Don Cheney would have been aware of Paul Avery at Bakersfield Junior College in 1953, because Paul Avery was everywhere. He wrote for the school newspaper, like I said. He was a cheerleader for a while for the basketball team. He was the director of student assemblies, where he would get where the whole freshman class and sophomore class would go into the auditorium, and Paul Avery would get up and introduce some entertainment, like people dancing, or a play would get acted out, like a short play, or just some form of entertainment. And he'd say, "My name's Paul Avery, and I'm here to do this." He was all over the place. There's no way that Don Cheney didn't know who he was in 1953. So, being that I believe Don Cheney was the Zodiac killer, it ties in what you're talking about, what was called the Halloween card, which was sent personally to Paul Avery. He misspelled his name intentionally, called it Averly, Averly, added the L for some reason. And it said, "From your secret pal." So that immediately went off in my head when I realized that these two guys were in such close proximity to each other, most likely had a class together in 1953. And then, just as more icing on the cake, the school play that was done in 1953 of that same semester, in May of 1953, was The Mikado, the one of the biggest influences on the Zodiac killer, who constantly quoted that Willow. Well, that all comes from the Gilbert and Sullivan light opera called The Mikado. So in 1953, you have Don Cheney, who's a principal player in this case. Even if you don't believe he's the Zodiac killer, he's a principal player because he brought forward the prime suspect in 1971, being Arthur Lee Allen. So he's a huge player. He forever changed this case when he did that. Then you have Paul Avery, the guy that made himself famous for reporting on this case. And then you have the Mikado, the probably the biggest influence on the Zodiac killer, whether it meant something to him or not. He certainly quoted it quite a bit. So you got three major elements going on. 4 hours away from the Bay Area, and 16, 17 years prior to the first Zodiac killing in 1968, you have three major components going on 4 hours away from the Bay Area at this tiny college. That is the nucleus of the Zodiac killer. Bakersfield College, 1953. Most of Paul Avery's friends went to 4 years of high school with Don Cheney. Paul Avery did not go to Bakersfield. Most of Paul Avery's friends went to Bakersfield High School with Don Cheney. His sister knew some of Paul Avery's friends. It was just such a tight little world. It's that the odds the two guys knew each other then are very high. So that bigger than when Tahoe 27 discovered the whole Tim Holt comet connection with the Zodiac, who she's not even convinced the Halloween card is authentic Zodiac. So I think that's the biggest discovery in this case since it happened.
Right. And so, as we wind down here, a lot of people give a lot of power to ancestral and DNA testing, modern DNA testing, as a possible way to eventually solve this case. What do you think has to happen at this point to solve this case, or do you think it's always going to be circumstantial from here on out?
I don't know. I would love it to be solved with DNA, and I'm prepared to be wrong. I don't think I am, especially when I made my latest discovery in this case 4 weeks ago, which to me is as far as circumstantial evidence goes, it's over the top. It's more than I think anyone should really need. My last discovery about Don Cheney being that he had a close relative with the last name Paradise, Paradice. I can't explain enough how rare that is as a surname. And I found that just doing basic genealogy. And I just found that a month ago, and I did a couple videos on it. And more people gel on that, they're going to realize that just the sheer odds that he's that closely related to someone with that last name tells you in of itself that's where the name Paradise comes from. And that odd spelling of Paradise, that's where it comes from in the letters. Because if you take Don Cheney, who's been associated heavily with the Zodiac case since 1971, when he brings Alan forward, and the sheer odds that he has a relative with that name. And you could say, well, maybe the Zodiac got it from a casino or something like that. Well, there was only back in the day one hotel in Reno that was called the Paradise Motel with that spelling, and that was before the Donna Lass thing. But just the sheer odds that Don Cheney would be, it's his grandfather's first cousin was Mary Martha Paradise. I can't tell you in terms of statistics that's like getting struck by lightning probably 3 times in a row. The U.S. Census even now today only has 2,000 people in the entire census with the name Paradise with that spelling. So back in the Zodiac days of 1969, 70, 71, there was probably 600 or 700 people with that last name in all of America, which was 217 million people. And the fact that Don Cheney's grandfather's first cousin was Mary Martha Paradise, who had a lot of money that she inherited and was married to a well-known architect, it tells you that he would have definitely been aware of her and her name and the spelling of her name. That for me is just mind-blowing circumstantially. And it's not going to be enough for most people. I mean, it's just not. If you have a favorite suspect, you're just going to look at that. I mean, believe me, it scares the heck out of people with other suspects. When I found that, the Avery thing scared them really bad, but the Paradise thing has them sweating bad. And when I found that, I knew for sure I had the right guy. So I'm all in with Cheney. I really am. I don't like to be cocky or try to say Cheney synonymously with the name Zodiac, but at this point, it's him. It's just, I'm sorry, it's him. It's just, there's too much circumstantially that point to him.
Yeah. Well, you bring up so many excellent points, and I've looked at other suspects as well. Like we brought up earlier, Richard Kwiatkowski and Ross Sullivan, some of the popular ones and everything. But you make some very compelling points that other people with their favorite suspects, I feel like, don't make. So I feel like it's definitely worthwhile for people to check out your YouTube channel. To, like I said earlier, check out the links in the description and the books and everything. Drew, is there any other social media or anything you would like viewers to check out or anything?
No, just the YouTube channel is great, and I have everything on there. Even if you don't ever, I never push books a lot. I don't make my living writing books. I just like to get the thoughts out there and the research out there mainly. But I know a lot of people don't like to read, but I put everything out on YouTube. That's free to watch, and most of everything that we talked about is on there. So if you want to read deeper, the books are there, but if you don't, everything is on the YouTube channel, and I do DB Cooper stuff. I think I figured out who that is as well. So those are my 2 favorite cases. So definitely check out the channel. It'll be on there. I try to do something at least once every 2 weeks, but I love what you guys are doing. It's great work. I mean, it's just going to keep growing, and I'll get the word out about this as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And before we leave, are you into the JonBenet Ramsey murder case at all? Have you ever looked into that?
Yeah, I've looked into it quite a bit. A friend of mine, his name's Tom Horan, who wrote a book called the Great Zodiac Hoax Theory. He's the author of that book, which is obviously a different theory than mine, but we're friends. I like him a lot, and he has done I think at least a 3-part series on the JonBenet case, and I think he has it 100% of how this case played out. So that's the Stones Unturned podcast on YouTube. And I couldn't do it any better. I wouldn't even touch John Bonet now because we talked about it on the phone as well, the John Bonet case, but he nails it. I mean, I can't believe what he has on there should be in book form for more people to get out to, but I think he nails that case perfectly.
Excellent. Yeah, well, I'll have to check that out myself. I was just wondering because I know before Zodiac, I did a lot of research into John Bonet and that whole thing, and so I just quickly have you here. I want to take advantage and ask you to get your thoughts on that real quick if you've looked into that or anything like that. But
yeah, absolutely. I think Patsy Ramsey killed John Bonet. I think she was sexually abused when she was young. I think it's really dark, Masonic type stuff. Her father was a guy named John Paul, a high level Freemason, never made a whole lot of money, but he knew everybody. He found the financial backing for John Ramsey's company, Access Graphics. Really, both his daughters were Miss West Virginia, and they weren't particularly that great looking or talented. This guy was extremely well connected, despite not making a lot of money or having this high position. But he was extremely well connected. I think it's really dark stuff. And everything points to John and Patsy probably, co-writing the ransom letter. Outside intruder is absolute nonsense in this case. You can tell there's probably two voices going on in the letter. It's clear that it was between the two of them. The reason the grand jury couldn't come back because they couldn't probably decide which of the two, did what. But and I always had those beliefs. And then when I saw Tom's stuff on it, I was like, yeah, we agree 100% on this one.
For sure, yeah. And then hopefully maybe one day when you're able to, if you want to come back on the show and we can talk about John Bonet and get, go into more detail on that maybe, or just any other, maybe talk about DB Cooper, whatever the case may be. We'd love to have you back on and do an entire video just dedicated to those subjects and those cases.
Oh, absolutely.
It'd be awesome. Well, once again, Drew, thank you so much for joining us. It's a huge honor. We greatly appreciate it. Everyone, please go check out the links in the description. Go check out Drew's YouTube channel. Subscribe to his YouTube channel, like his videos, comment, all that good stuff. And if you would, please also like this video, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. My name is Coleman.
And I'm Byron.
Peace out, guys.
Ha ha ha!